Hello, cruel, cruel world. My name is Dr. Shaham Das. I'm a consultant forensic psychiatrist. I assess mentally disordered offenders for a living so that you don't have to. You can call me the ominous Shahaminous. Okay, so Danny Masterson. He is on trial, accused of multiple sexual assaults and accused of that word that rhymes with grape, not vape, the other one that I can't say on YouTube. He is the dude from that 70s show, you know, the guy that I'm talking about, kind of his hair looks like pubes. One fascinating aspect of the trial for me is that one of the victims very recently, she's been kept anonymous. She's been called Jane Doe number 3, as she's the third victim in the trial. CB are her initials, that's how I'll refer to her. So in a Los Angeles courtroom, very recently, she claims that Scientology not only didn't help her when she tried to report this, but they tried to victim shame her. They tried to force her into an ethics program, and they tried to excuse Masterson's actions. So, what are the background details to this case? What specific allegations did Jane Doe number 3 CB make, both towards Masterson and also towards Scientology? And what are the kind of psychological processes behind it all in this type of scenario, especially when you have an institution like Scientology behind you? I'm going to address all of those things and many, many more in this episode of A Psych for Sore Minds. Sit back, relax, and let's get started. Okay, let's start off with the allegations. So in December 2001, Masterson's longtime girlfriend CB had dinner and drinks the night before in a restaurant across the street from the celebrity centre owned by Scientology. And according to the victim's testimony, her kind of backside was torn and it had a little bleeding. She said, and I quote, "I was in a lot of pain, I couldn't sit down. And no, before you ask, it wasn't an Indian restaurant she went to the night before." So CB then detailed that she went downstairs the morning afterwards and she saw Masterson. And she said, and I'm quoting, "I remember asking him what had happened last night. I was very confused. He laughed at me and said that he had sex with me there. I asked him if I was unconscious the whole time and he said yes. It broke my heart because I really trusted him." That is really quite horrific, isn't it? So then the victim, who was 22 at the time and who had become a Scientologist because Masterson kind of insisted that she did when he met her at 19, she went across the road to the celebrity centre owned by the Church of Scientology to kind of report what had happened to the church. And CB said that she'd never considered taking the matter to the police because the kind of ethos of Scientology was that you didn't involve people outside of Scientology in such matters. So what happened when she went to Scientology? Sorry to say, things got even worse. She met the Scientology ethics officer named Miranda Scoggins, and CB said during her trial that this person, Scoggins, explained to me that you can't R-word somebody you're in a relationship with. Scoggins also said to her that I'd done something that I, as in CB, had done something to cause it. We're all responsible for the conditions we're in. She explained to me that there was no crime committed and she put me on an ethics program. And CB was told to prepare an ethics report for ethics officer Scoggins on what had occurred with Masterson. So not only has she gone all through these horrible experiences, but she's even given extra homework. And she was specifically instructed that in the report, she was not to have the R word, the one that rhymes with grape, in her report, just like I'm not allowed to say it on this channel. Nor was she supposed to include any emotional terms. CB said that Masterson was completely unconcerned, indifferent to any blowback from Scientology, and told CB that he himself didn't need to go to the church's ethics program because of his high kind of status within Scientology. I mean, he didn't have to go to the program. Surely they could have sent him a PowerPoint. Ethics, page number 1, rule number 1, do not grape. So what are the consequences of all of this? Masterson is potentially facing 45 years to life in prison if he is found guilty on the 3 counts of forcible R-word after he was arrested in June 2020 by the LAPD. I should say that this was all first reported to the cops in 2004 and there were 3 victims. All of this occurred in Masterson's home between 2001 and 2003. The consequence of this was that Masterson was fired from the Netflix comedy That 17 Show in late 2017. I should say that he has always insisted that the sex was consensual. There's been some insinuation, though no proof yet, that he'd been drugging the drinks of his victims. Also, I think it has to be mentioned that his victims themselves were all members of Scientology, though they were lower ranking. So that leads me to a question for you, as Psych for Sore guys and gals. What do you think? Do you think we should stick to the ethos of innocent until proven guilty? Or do you think in this case, because there's so many allegations, that there's no smoke without fire? Let me know in the schmoment section below. Before I got into my own thoughts, I would also say that Masterson also was facing a paused civil trial in which, interestingly, Scientology itself is a co-defendant as well as him. And he's been free on a $3.3 million bail in the criminal case, not the civil case, since his arrest. Okay, blah, blah, blah. That was all the background. That was all the foreplay. Here are my thoughts. Here's my analysis. So I'm a consultant forensic psychiatrist and I assess mentally disordered offenders, and I do assess these kinds of offences as well. In my line of work, I very often see the similar kind of character traits and cognitive distortions in perpetrators of these kinds of assaults. So there's some of them are fairly obvious. There's, entitlement, there's misogynistic views such as women are, objects, or that my need for gratification outranks the empathy or the well-being of my victims. Lack of empathy, not caring about the rights of others. And on top of that, you see certain types of behaviors that are really common. So grooming behaviors, which is where you kind of find somebody that's vulnerable that you want to target, and you kind of chip away at their confidence, and you gradually increase your sexualized behavior to them sort of subtly, so they barely even notice it's happening. Gaslighting obviously is another massive one. So gaslighting has overlaps to grooming, but it's more about lying to that person and making them doubt what the truth is. Domestic violence is very common in these kind of cases. Drug and alcohol is very, very common, and often these assaults happen when the victim or the perpetrator or both are intoxicated. By the way, I've got videos on some of those things on grooming and gaslighting, including the Rotherham scandal, which is one of the most heartbreaking, horrific grooming scandals in UK history. So I would say that most people have some of those characteristics. Occasionally you can lack, or so the perpetrators can lack, baseline characteristic traits. So sometimes the offences are more kind of opportunistic, or sometimes they're in the context of mental illness, especially as a psychiatrist in the cases I see. So quick example, I've seen more than one defendant who's got mania, who's got bipolar, and because they become so disinhibited and so kind of sexually excited, and they're not able to think through the consequence of their actions, they end up committing sexual offences where that isn't necessarily their baseline misogynistic views. So I'm not saying that any of those things, being opportunistic or in the context of mental illness, means that they're any less responsible or that they cause less damage. I'm just saying that those people don't have the pervasive kind of background cognitive distortion. So I'm not trying to excuse them. God, it's getting hot in here. Please don't cancel me. Okay, so Masterson obviously abused his position, his authority. He was a kind of relative celebrity. He was kind of up there in the hierarchy of Scientology. And I actually think that this is relevant, celebrities, because as I'm sure you know, there have been lots of celebrity cases of sexual assault and allegations that haven't been proved. So why is this relevant? I think celebrities are even more entitled because they do get attention, they get loved in general by the public. Sometimes they might have attention from the opposite sex. So I think this kind of builds into their egotistical and narcissistic behavior. And you can see this pattern emerging when you look at people like R. Kelly, Jimmy Savile. By the way, I've done vids on both of those people. Go chiggity check them out, always be plugging. But I think sometimes the celebrity prey on the vulnerable. So in R. Kelly's case, he was preying on young women who wanted to make it in the music industry. Jimmy Savile preyed on a whole range of people, including patients. So they look for somebody that is quite vulnerable. So on top of all of those things, I think there's an extra layer of kind of social complexity when some of these offenders have the support of an industry or an institution behind them. And how does that all work? Before I answer that, I just want to introduce you to my channel, A Psych for Sore Minds. This is a smorgasbord of issues related to mental illness and offending. If you want to hear about the crossroads between the two, I do high profile cases. I talk about my own patients sometimes. I implore you to subscribe to this channel. Not only does it help me out immeasurably, but it will actually cure that fungal toe infection that you've had for years. That's why you keep your socks on all the time, even when you go swimming in the beach. It looks disgusting. It needs to change, fam. Subscribe and I will sort you out. Okay, back to the task at hand. As I was saying, that in a lot of high profile cases, there are institutions that kind of at best turn a blind eye and at worst support the perpetrators. So for R. Kelly, it was the music executives. He was still making them a lot of money, so they kind of allowed him to do what he did. For Jimmy Savile, it was a whole bunch of different institutions, from the Yorkshire Police to the Royal Family to Broadmoor staff, and I've actually done a specific video about his time in Broadmoor. So what I'm saying is, because he had connections with and kind of friendships to these people, it would have made him feel more emboldened and entitled and kind of untouchable, and possibly more importantly, it would have made his victims even more kind of fearful that these people are so sort of renowned and well known that nobody will take their side. So I think that all of these institutions turned a blind eye, but in Masterton's case, I think it was different. I think Scientology actually actively tried to protect him and defend him. So they even tried to gaslight the victim, it seemed. If you look at some of her statements, you know, that basically they were trying to say that it was her fault. So again, this would have made Masterton feel even more emboldened. And I think the fact that there are multiple accusations kind of shows that, doesn't it? It shows that he's not challenging himself, his own behaviours, or changing his behaviours. So to summarise, I've just kind of explained all the recent allegations in the Danny Masterson case. I've told you about what's occurred in terms of evidence from CB. I've discussed Scientology's alleged involvement in trying to cover this up. And again, I should stress that this is all alleged. I'm working on the assumption that what CB's saying is true, but I suppose time will tell and we shall see. We covered the usual kind of personality traits and scenarios involving assaults, especially when they come from celebrities. I've given you everything. I've given you all my knowledge inside my head, and I want nothing back apart from you to subscribe, like, and show me love, because I'm very insecure and I need those subs, fam. That's all I have to say. Buy my goddamn book. Stay euthymic. Take care of yourself, and do not forget, I love you.